we're back. It's 3 years later, a leftovers chat. Probably feels like 8 years later now if everyone's stuck inside. It's amazing to me how excited I got for season 3. I was losing steam there. Amazing how excited I got for season 3 at the end of season 2. So we're back. Leftovers chat. 6 years later, episode 3-1, the Book of Kevin. Since we never do this, and I might try to do a visual element, do me a favor, like, subscribe, hit the little ding bell on the buzzer for notifications. And I guess we're just going to get right into episode 3-1, the Book of Kevin, which we did do a reaction video for, and I am happy to say we got some of Benji's strongest reactions to anything, which I'm going to talk about at those specific moments when we get there. But we need to get right into the episode. And this episode starts with 0 credits. Before we talk about 0 credits and then into the weird scene that we begin with, this is the 3rd season of The Leftovers. It was after season 2. No one was sure if the show was going to come back. It did very well critically, but almost nobody watched it. So after some kind of keep the leftovers going in New York, there was a couple people, I want to say 12, but it was probably more like 100, standing outside the HBO offices in guilty remnant clothing, smoking cigarettes. And since HBO doesn't care too much about ratings and prestige is what they like sometimes, we were gifted a 3rd season of The Leftovers, a much shorter season. A season with a reduced budget, but it was a chance to give us more of what we felt we needed right after that 2nd season. And we were able to continue on and maybe get some closure to our characters, even though season 2 seemed to end with some closure. Did you want to say anything about that before I get started?
No, not so much about that. Just the whole vibe of this season so far, the vibe that I picked up from the trailer that we reacted to, and then the vibe of the first episode was that what I like about this is that it feels very foreign, if that's the right word, to what we've seen before in The Leftovers. And I know that's quite a thing to say, given that we've seen a lot and it has a lot of breadth in the show, but this feels kind of I want to say exotic. I don't know if that's the right word. It feels like it's pushing into areas that we haven't seen before. I know in the trailer there was people on boats, underwater, like running. Seemed to be a bit more action going on, and it just did feel like something different. And I think what you mentioned, it was maybe in the trailer video or the first episode discussion, was that even though it was lower budget, Lindelof had been given a lot more creative, free reign to do what he wanted. And so I don't know if that's why it felt like watching this, it was like, okay, I really don't know anything could happen there. It feels quite...
Well, let me just say, to clarify, he always had creative freedom. The first season is based upon a book with him and Tom Perrotta, and it's a Tom Perrotta show too. They worked together. They were both showrunners on the show. But after season 2 and how the Lindelofy things that were brought in, the International Assassin episode, all those aspects, Jarden, Miracle, how everything worked on all cylinders of a TV show. I mean, it hit everything. While they're really not sure if it was going to work that time, they just went full in. They leaned in, as they say, with this season. And I have to tell you, this episode is pretty tame compared to what we're going to see. And I feel bad, going so high above on season 2, thinking about what we're about to see. It's going to get crazy. It is going to get crazy, and it's going to go more in the direction, and things are going to move pretty fast. So you ready to get in?
Yeah, and right. I think that's what I mean in terms of the vibe. Just feels like there's an edge to it, and I could pick that up.
And we'll talk about it too. It happens halfway through this episode too. But first, in season 2 we had the Cave Woman episode, and we have this scene at the beginning, and there's no credits, and it's a depiction of the Great Disappointment in the Millerite movement. and I don't know if you did any research on that. I have. This is one of those things where if you listen to any Leftovers podcast, you will get a full description of what happened. I don't know. Did you do some research on it yourself to see what was going on?
Yeah, I did. I had a read, perused a few sources, but I'm sure it's nothing that hasn't been covered before.
I'll just give a quick summary. The great disappointment of the Millerite movement was the reaction that followed Baptist preacher William Miller's proclamations that Jesus Christ would return to the earth by 1844, what he called the Advent. That's all I'm going to say about it, about the actual movement. Do you have anything to say about what we actually saw before she starts taking that final walk to the church?
Well, it's a great song, for one. It's
a catchy song. I'm not one for the ideas of the song.
That's
personal.
Didn't read the lyrics too closely afterwards. But is it one of them where you kind of get caught up in the melody and the feel of the song, and then you go back and you read it and you think, oh, what was I singing along to that song?
It's not that bad, but it's definitely about what we're seeing. It's about, I wish we'd all been ready, and I'm pretty sure it is about the rapture, or the thing that this lady, this unnamed Millerite woman, is expecting to happen over and over again, and it doesn't happen. And you see her kind of lose her family along the way in her belief. Her family that was kind of along for the ride with her the first time. You see like them with a baby cradle, I think, when they're trying to get rid of their stuff. So obviously it seems to me that they're showing that there's been a loss there. And, you just, at the end of the song, you see it like 2 or 3 times. They change the dates, right? And they keep waiting for this thing to happen, and she keeps waiting. And finally, the last time, they hit you with this departure theme, right? She's walking in, she walks into the church, and she lays down with the other people, and it turns into the modern day guilty remnant at the Jarden Welcome Center. Mm-hmm. And bam, we're in the Leftovers again, because Evie wakes up. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what do you think of that whole, like, first Millerite segment?
It's one of them where it's tough to watch in a way, but you also can't not watch it. It's like watching a train wreck happen. You want to look away because you have a feeling what's going to happen and it's not going to end too well. But they execute it with just, the cinematography and like the color palette and the setting and the whole thing just makes this really beautiful few minutes of this absolutely not so good thing that's been happening. So you have this sort of contrast between they package it up so beautifully, but the actual subject matter of what's happening is kind of depressing.
And that second season thing with the cable woman kind of trains you for this almost a little bit. You're like, okay, we're doing this again. And so we think that maybe we're going to get some kind of loose interpretation of what's going on here by the end. But right now, it's just an interesting thing that ties in almost with the guilty remnant, right?
Well, the guilty remnant, and later on in the episode, I think Matt.
Right. And I just want to point out that, it's interesting that, this family looks like they've lost their mom, right? But, the mom has also lost her family through this. And they might take her back, but she doesn't seem like she wants to go that way. It looks like it's over, right?
Yeah, I didn't quite pick up on whatever the subtle meaning was at the end when she goes and lays down. What is happening there?
I think that's a question that a lot of people have asked, and that's one of those we don't really know. We don't know if she lays down and, it's been speculated that she lays down and dies. It's been speculated that, it's the formings of an early GR type movement. It's one of those things we don't kind of get an answer to. Did you have anything else on this whole opening credit scene before I move on?
Well, the final thing I'd done when I was researching this was I didn't want to leave it on such a sad note, so I wanted to see if there was any better way of interpreting this. And the only thing that I found was that for a lot of people, if my understanding is correct, this great disappointment, it wasn't the end of their movement. It was more like the start of a new one. And as far as I understand it, the current religious organization, the 7 Day Adventists,
Yeah.
that's a lot of what they believe is based on what happened at this time. And I maybe I'm afraid that I might not be getting this totally right, but from what I read on, I understood that a lot of their belief today is that rather than being totally wrong, Miller was just kind of wrong in that he expected the second coming to happen exactly on that date, and that would be it. But they said rather that date was the beginning of the process of the second coming, and that's so he was kind of right, but also not right, and that's why it kind of lined up like it did. So it wasn't completely like that's it for that religious movement. So just gotta call that out in case anyone listening is of that particular faith.
Yeah, and so some of the things I've listened to, and I'll just add real quick, is it was actually the start of a bunch of different little branches, and one of them I think turned into the Jehovah's Witnesses, and a bunch of different like sects of the same thing, right? Maybe. Okay.
Well, all I know is that sort of period of American history was awash with religious fervor and excitement. It was like the Second Great Awakening, was kind of like the early 1800s. So,
Man,
but
just
yeah,
like modern times, baby. Modern
there was a
times.
lot of stuff coming out of that. Like we're actually not celebrating, but the religious group I belong to right now, it's this year is 200 years since kind of the roots of our religion, and that was in the early 1800s as well.
And that's
So
the Church of the Latter-day Saints, right?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one.
And happy Passover. It's Passover Easter week to anyone stuck inside. We just started our annual slog through the 10 Commandments, 5.5 hours with commercials. So shout out to Memnet. If you've seen that movie a lot, you'll know who that is. But okay, let's get to Jarden. All right.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the Jarden Welcome Center. This transitions over to all the white clothed people laying down. Evie and Meg discuss what's next after the finale of season 2. Meg is prepared for the inevitable as Evie gets a clear view of the government's drone strike that kills her, Meg, and anyone in the Welcome Center. Boom. Avengers Endgame style 3 years later. What'd you think of the way the GR went out?
I honestly didn't realize, and I think you can tell watching the reaction video because I didn't, I didn't really react because part of me was like, they dropped a bomb. That's interesting. And then it took a few minutes for me to think, oh, they dropped a bomb. Oh dear, like
Yeah, like
there's no way out of it.
you're kind of in disbelief, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
And
especially because it's in the trailer they'd shown Evie and Meg, even if it was for just a brief second. I took that as okay, these going to be players in this new game. They're going to be in this season. They're going to play a role. This is good. We get to follow up on what happened last season. For them just to be wiped out right at the beginning, while it's not completely untrue to the trailer, because the part they show in the trailer we did get, it's definitely not what I expected.
yeah, and this goes back to it's the third season. We have to wrap some things up.
Mm-hmm.
We have to get people to a certain place. We also have to get to a point where the departure is it's the 7th year anniversary, so we have to skip some time. And this is kind of a way of doing that. And it also sets up John's story at the end of the episode. right?
Mhm.
It also sets up the story that there's, and this is great, that ripple effect. There's a lot of callbacks to the season one in this season, and the ripple effects I said about the DSD and all these like agencies that have gone up around the departure. There's now, conspiracy theories that are true about the government covering up, this killing of the GR. And, I'll say it later. I want one of those truth for Evie, justice for Evie shirts you see wearing at the protest. You know what I mean? So it goes around to this world building.
Yeah, it did make me think watching it though that Evie was perhaps a little bit in over her head. The fact that she was thinking there was something more, like there was some higher purpose that they were still waiting for, whereas Meg, I think, understood the end game.
Yeah,
But she
totally.
was crazy, so
Yeah, totally. And Evie got a little hornswoggled here, right? She knew she wanted to make a difference, but she didn't think she was going to die doing it. And so maybe she wasn't full on GR because she wasn't ready to accept the fact, as Patty was, as Gladys was, that this meant her death. At the concept of making people remember and making the people of Jarden remember, right? So we get one of my favorite shots. It's even a Lego leftovers, which I'll put up on here. Is Jarden Police Chief Kevin Garveys surveys the hole that used to be the Welcome Center as he oversees over 700 spiritual pilgrims coming into town. Upon his mighty steed, he now oversees Miracle, which has turned into a destination point for spiritually minded people. And with the 7th anniversary of the sudden departure 14 days away, things seem to be getting pretty busy. Tommy, who is now an officer working with his father, helps with crowd control.
No, I agree. That is one of the more badass parts of the show that I've seen so far, with Kevin riding in the Sign of the Judgment song playing. That's
And the vibe is different in Jarden. It doesn't seem to be a whole bunch of rangers keeping people out. It seems to be Kevin looking very leisurely on a horse, letting people in. Man, he's looking pretty good in his full dress in that horse, man. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, the beard as well. So I think what you were saying earlier, that we had to skip forward in time so we could get to this 7-year anniversary of the departure. You've got a case for that, but I'm starting to wonder if it was just so we could see time lapse and Kevin with the beard.
Well, I mean, Kevin's not the only one with a beard here, right?
No, but I think maybe he does it best.
He does it best, but every male, with the exception of Michael and Tommy, has a beard. So that was the look for the season, I guess.
And as promised,
you're trying?
I'm trying my best.
Right. I'm trying my best too. It's hard, very hard.
And the shades are back for Kevin. I don't know if
shades.
I didn't see him. He had a couple of times in season 2, but they seem to be back in full force right now.
Well, we're full on. We've been through the hotel. We know where we are. We're Police Chief Garvey. Somehow we've become the chief of Jarden now. We've become the head of police in Jarden. He's so full of confidence after all this. And I guess he had the backing of John and the church leadership. And they think he can't die, I guess. So they think he's the best person to be chief. You know what I mean?
They've got a case.
They've got a case. There's definitely a case for that. And certain people are allowed to stay past the new rules, like the guy in the pillar. He's been grandfathered in. And we have what I like to call the Busey Bros, right? They have been deputized to help. He's farming out things. And he's letting people in, and he's calling them pilgrims. You know what I mean? He's playing into it to make people feel the opposite of what they felt when they came to Jarden in the second season. Seems like he's doing everything right that John wasn't doing right. Was doing wrong. A little note, that statue, the Busey thing, was actually meant to be Anthony Bourdain. In the first season, they had a run of people that were also missing, and it was a lot of celebrity chefs. And Anthony Bourdain did not give his permission for them to use a big blow up Anthony Bourdain, but Gary Busey did. And I don't know if you're are familiar with Gary Busey, but he has a rep. He's an actor. Do you know who he is at all?
What's he been in?
Well, I think most famously is going to be the original Point Break with Keanu Reeves. But he's just been in a ton of movies. He was in the Buddy Holly story a long time ago, Big Wednesday, a surf movie. He's been in a lot of movies that, like the original Lethal Weapon. Like, I can't even name all the movies he's been in. I can name more of his son's movies. His son was in Contact. You know what I mean? So, but he's kind of got this reputation as being a crazy guy now. You know what I mean? Wild-eyed, former drug addict, but still actory guy. So just the fact that these guys are, Busey bros about it is pretty funny, and it's a joke. And they not only are they going with like the quote unquote crazy, the Lindelof stuff in this season, they're really leaning into humor, and we'll see that in a little bit. I'm gonna go on. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say, like the town and what it's become?
I mean, it looks like it's meets the weird. It's met a weird compromise between how it was before. It's like it feels almost at the same time more free and peaceful in a weird way, but also a lot more crazy and chaotic. But it manages to do both at the same time.
But it's managed, it seems like.
Right, yeah.
But it seems like it's managed, and they don't show it. But I bet you, there's tourist dollars coming in and all this kind of stuff that's happening.
Yeah. But no, just quickly on Tommy before we go on.
Oh, yeah,
I was glad to see Tommy looking cleaned up and put together. And also, it's nice to have Tommy and Kevin working as like a father-son pair, because we know previously that Kevin and Kevin Sr. did the same thing. So it's sort of keeping that trend going through the generations.
Yeah, and right now we're looking like everything's going pretty well. It's been 3 years. We have Tommy back in the fold, refusing to top top button for some reason. I don't know why. I didn't know why I noticed that. It's not me. But after we see Tommy, Kevin goes to Matt's church, where we see a healthy Mary and their son Noah. Matt is preaching about miracle and how if something happens in 2 weeks, they are in the right place. And Kevin is very wary of Matt's rhetoric. What do you think about the reintroduction of Matt with Mary and Noah?
Well, just before that, as Kevin's walking up to the church, you see like there's the sign, and it says on it, so I think it was when those days expire, the sanctuary will be cleansed. I don't know if you know, but that's actually from Daniel chapter 8. I think it's verse 14, and that is the scripture that Miller used to guess when the second coming would be, and that's the scripture he based his projections on. I think
that's why you're here. Yeah,
a bit longer than that. It's like 2,300 days the sanctuary will be cleansed or something. But it's definitely the same thing. And then that's up on Matt's building. So that's why I'm seeing these parallels between the prologue and now what's going on in Matt.
Sure. And was there another Bible quote on the wall of the church? I don't remember.
I think it's the same. I think it was the same quotes as we explored in season 2.
Okay, cool.
So they don't look like they've changed those. No, yeah, I mean, but Matt himself, I'm always glad to see Matt. It's funny, even though I know his acting, it's still the speech he gives. I mean, it's good speech, man. When
it's a great speech.
I get a feeling here sometimes. It's like, yeah, I want to jump on. I want to follow this guy.
Do you want to follow him if he reveals that the chief of police is the new Messiah?
If the chief of police is Kevin Garvey, then
okay, all right, fair enough.
Noah, obviously Noah being a biblical name, Noah in the flood, Noah in the ark, the
Noah, Mary, Matt. I mean,
yeah,
Ethan, Benjamin. I mean, I don't know if Ethan is. My middle name is Israel, Benjamin. I mean, my wife is Rebecca. My son is Micah. Personal information. But anyway, it's like you can't walk 2 seconds in this world without finding a biblical name. But here they seem to be extra extra prevalent. That's why the name of the from what I know, for the name of the episode, it kind of stands out because it's the Book of Kevin, and I don't know, is Kevin a real biblical name? I don't know.
I can't recall it ever appearing in the Bible.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of pattern interrupt Book of Kevin.
So Kevin goes to see Michael and hides his computer. And Michael hides his computer. Kevin asks Matt to stop dropping flyers. Matt concedes. After Kevin leaves, he wants to make sure that Kevin hasn't, quote unquote, seen it. So they're obviously writing the Book of Kevin.
Yeah, and first time watching this, I was like, I thought he meant whatever it was Michael was doing online, and I sort of breezed right past the fact that there was this big leather-bound book on the table. But then when I watched it back, I saw that book was like right there, right in the open. And interestingly, the site that Michael was on was the Mapleton Gazette, and it was an article about Memorial Day violence, I think. So maybe they're doing more reading on Kevin's life, I think.
You know what? I think someone must have touched on that in all the hours of things I've listened to, but I don't remember that. I remember, theories about them actually writing the book of Kevin and copying it online. But I missed that. So yeah, if that's what they're looking at, they're obviously doing research on Kevin to get more information.
Mm-hmm. Just behind Michael, I know this is just a shot in the dark, but I know numbers tend to have some significance in Lindelof's work. There's like numbers for church attendance, I think, behind Michael, and those numbers are like 53, 21, 03.
Are they going up?
Or
was maybe it not that clear?
I can't remember. I think the thing was upside down. I can't remember.
Okay.
Didn't know if those numbers meant anything.
Probably just really awesome production design. Yeah. You ready to go to roll call?
Yeah.
At roll call, Nora is back in her DSD role as secondary departure investigator. She has a cast, but her and Kevin are happy. Kevin gets a visit from season 1's Dean. Dean has come to talk about the conspiracy involving dogs taking over the government. Kevin explains that it is in his head. It is here that we start to see Kevin have little flashbacks to what he's experienced, and Dean leaves feeling betrayed. This is a big... There's a couple things in this scene here. First of all, the show's taking it very seriously until Dean actually says, dogs, because the music stops.
Yeah.
The music just stops.
It totally sets him up.
Now, were you happy to see the return of Dean?
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, I was, which is why it made me so sad later on in the episode, because I'd missed Dean.
But your face lit up when you saw Dean. I saw.
It did, yeah. And then it did the opposite later on.
Yeah.
Because Dean's, I always found Dean to be an interesting. I don't know if foil is the right term, but for somebody who kind of draws out certain attributes in Kevin and helps play on his character, I always felt those two complemented each other nicely. Especially in season 1 when Kevin had so much uncertainty, but Dean had this kind of surety and like he knew what was going on, like he knew what was up. And I was kind of looking forward to a bit more of that this season, even though maybe it would have been the reverse relationship. But like you say, this is a short season and we need to make sure stuff is happening. So unfortunately, Dean wasn't in this episode for ages.
But it's a good comparison to see where they both were in the first season and see what's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
And it kinds to bring to light a little bit more of what Kevin was going through in that first season. Because
right. Because now that Kevin's okay-ish, it seems ridiculous, but it's more of a comedy thing. Whereas in the first season, it was so because of where Kevin was, this guy was seen as like an authority figure, and like it just completely subverts that, I think.
And especially when Kevin says "paw," right? Like when they get their hand on the button and Kevin goes paw, and then Dean knows he's just not on his side.
But it is weird, I think. Weird of Kevin to kind of scorn this stuff when, you know, he was just as bad at one point. It does feel a little bit like, you know, well, how would you have felt, Kevin, if somebody had acted like this to you when you had all these visions and weird things happening to you? And I don't know if part of the reason Kevin is so quick to kind of write off Dean's story and try and just say, no, it's in your head, is because he's scared, and he's scared of what happened to him, and it's like he's trying to persuade himself that it's all in Dean's head, and stuff like this isn't happening, and there's not this undercurrent to stuff.
And as he's talking to Dean, he gets a flashback to him pushing Patty, a young Patty, into the well, right? Yeah. So I mean, it's just bubbling under there, as we'll find out later. There's a lot bubbling under there.
Yeah. And Dean, is that a dog whistle that he blows at Kevin?
That is a dog whistle. And
it's the look of defiance on his face as he does that is
and the look that Kevin gives him, because, you know, except for any foray he made into any hotels or his experiences, what happened to him in season 2, you know, there but for the grace of God go I kind of thing, because, you know, Dean is, you know, who's to say what is what in this world, but is full on. He's dressing up. He's doing Fight Club type tactics, right? He's dressing up in maitre d' things as waiters to go into senators' banquets to get samples. Do you know what I mean? There's a whole other level, and who's to say what? Because his evidence at the end of the episode is stolen by a dog. So
right, and that's why I think this is going to escalate, because I wouldn't be so quick. I think.
You think the dogs are back?
I think the dogs are back. The way the music cuts him off, the way it makes him sound so ridiculous, is so quick. It shuts him down so quick and so totally that you just know it's not going to be that easy, I think.
Kevin was being a little insensitive from where he's been.
Definitely.
That's
Which,
for sure.
I mean, Laurie calls him out on that later.
Well, we're not talking about Laurie yet. Right. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on. Mm-hmm. Kevin goes to see John, who is giving an Isaac type reading to people. He is being fed information from Laurie, who is upstairs. John and Laurie are now married and now using this scheme to help people move on. They even shred the money people spend on their services. Kevin explains Dean's situation and Laurie agrees to help. Okay. The most fun I've had doing this entire podcast, doing this entire series of things, was rewatching the edited reaction video to this episode and watching you see Laurie Garvey / Murphy for the first time. You were so put out and upset for a long time. And these reaction videos can only be so long. And I spent a long time watching you shaking your head in just disbelief. So now, before we go into the reading thing they're doing, I want to know what is going through your mind when you see Laurie for the first time upstairs and you realize what's going on. Please take a minute.
I don't know. I feel like it's hard to do it justice because there's so much going on. And well, first of all, there's the fact that I was already not predisposed to be in the best of. I didn't hold Laurie up to the highest standard before. She wasn't one of my favorite characters of season 2. She was one of the points I felt was the kind of weakest in that season. And I just didn't. A lot of her character motivation and what was going on with her, I just didn't understand or didn't agree with. And I was like, okay, well, at least we got that over with, right? At least that's out of the way now. We've got a new season. It's 3 years later. Let's just go into this anew. And I suspend my judgment. You know, Laurie, I'm willing to give you a second shot. Let's see what you got for us this season. And then the very first shot we see of her is her just totally scamming some guy who is deeply emotional and sensitive about a very traumatic life event, and it's like, come on, Laurie, same old tricks like this. Like, come on.
Did it help the gentleman?
We don't know, do we?
Well, I mean, in that
She says
moment,
it does, but she would say that, wouldn't she?
well, but he seemed to be pretty. John, you seemed to be pretty. I mean, going along with it. And the guy seemed to have when he got a hug from John, which is weird to see. He seemed to be he seemed to have at least that same bit of relief that Nora had when she hugged Wayne, which is kind of what they're going for, some temporary kind of relief. It seemed to work, and it seemed the fact that they feel like they're doing it for the right purpose, and burning the money, or shredding the money, seems to be John's idea, and it seems to go along with that thing of like people aren't going to take it seriously unless they're paying for it.
Well, for one, I don't see why they can't just give the money away. Seems a bit dumb to destroy it. I guess it's kind of like you have a cat, right?
I have many.
Yeah, and um, let's imagine, disaster strikes one day and one of your cats runs away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I, being a friend of yours and seeing some of your cats before, I happen to know what this cat looks like. So I go down the street, and I mean, this is hypothetical, assuming I live near you, and I find somebody else who owns cats, and they, surprise, surprise, have a cat that kind of looks like yours. So in the middle of the night, I just break in, I steal their cat. The next day, I walk back to your house and say, "Hey, look, I happen to find your cat just roaming around in my garden, and give you this cat." And you say, "Oh, great, thank you." So have I or have I not helped you out there?
You have, and I don't know the difference, so you got me.
Yeah, but I mean, it still doesn't change the fact that I'm a crappy person for doing that, does it?
No, I guess not. I guess not.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, it's a good one. My question is to you: is how did you feel about the pairing up of John and Laurie? Because TV shows do tend to do this sometimes to keep everyone involved in the same circle.
Um, well, we kind of knew that John and Erica's time together was coming to an end, so I wasn't surprised to see John and Erica apart. But then going a step further and pairing up John and Laurie, um, I mean, it was kind of secondary to what I was thinking about at the time, so I just kind of rolled with it. But it was.
What are you wondering where Erika is?
I am wondering where Erica is, but I'm hoping we see more of her, but I'm not sure we will.
Well, we just have to keep it back of our mind that the actress at the time, the great Regina King,
Mm-hmm.
is basically on the cusp of world domination at this exact time when they're filming this. Like literally, like winning Oscars and doing everything, and she did a little great stint on The Leftovers. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Did you have anything else to say about Laurie and John here? I will look me in the eye again. Favorite part of the podcast. We're going to be able to talk about Laurie more.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can compose a better way of explaining some of my thoughts for next time. But I mean, for me, the thing just feels like, so Laurie starts out and she's in a cult, and she's like, she's in a cult, like she is in there, and she gets like right to the top of it, and I guess what happens is she has some kind of life altering event where she realizes her family's more important than the cult, when Jill is in the GR house when all chaos breaks loose, and that changes her maybe, and somehow she suddenly changes from being this super into the cult person until she's out there like dismantling cults left and right. Oh, and then she realizes, oh, I have a better idea. Let's just make a cult. And you know how I learned my lesson last time about not abusing my family. Well, I'm just going to do that again and kind of screw with my son's head by making him to like some fake prophet. And then she kind of learns a lesson from that because Tommy leaves, and you think, okay, maybe this is the time she kind of finally learns the lesson. And then we get into this season, and the first thing we see of her is she's back scamming people with John's not quite a family member right now, but he's sort of in that proximity and that they're together, and she's using him for this purpose. So it's like, again, Laurie, again, like what? Why?
Um, and all I'll say is, this show is about a family of people that is going through a bunch of shit, and we see her going through a bunch of shit. You know what I mean?
I mean, I guess we do, but part of the issue is that it never really seems like Laurie never. She always tries to have the image of her is that she isn't, like she is together and she does know what she's doing, and she doesn't appear like she's losing her mind, unlike Kevin. So there's less kind of leeway that we give to her, because we say, oh well, we can't justify her doing this stuff because she's not crazy, she's okay in the head. Whereas if we saw her every day and she was like a mess and like her hair was like falling out, and we'd be like, oh well, that kind of makes sense because she's not doing so good. Even though that might be what's happening inside of her, she sort of doesn't project that, and so we judge her a bit more harshly, and I'm definitely guilty of that.
Well, I mean, I think in a most powerful adversary, she wasn't well put together when she was kind of unhinged coming to Kevin, and the only thing that made her change was seeing how past her the Kevin was, as far as being a mess. And she was able to bring her down again. And she always has this psychiatric thing that she can hide behind, this work mode that she can go into. And I find that annoying when people do it in real life. And I kind of find it annoying when she does it. The actress is so good at doing it, though. It's like I don't like her for the reasons I'm supposed to not like her.
Yeah.
But we'll get more into that later.
But I did saying that, I did really like Laurie in season 1. I think that's partly why I felt so betrayed in season 2, is because I mean, even if you don't agree with the character, you can still respect them for their, strength of character, and they seem to have a set of principles that they stuck to, and that was, even though they were kind of weird principles, you sort of respect them for doing that. And then when they completely kind of, it's not even like they go back on those principles, it's like they go back on those principles and then they do like a figure of 8 around them, and then they like throw them over there, and then I don't know, it's a bit all over the place.
Okay. I'm gonna go to the birthday party. Mm-hmm. Okay. Tommy's surprise birthday party all looks fun on the surface, and Jill even shows up. It becomes obvious that Lily is missing. Everyone sits around and listens to Kevin's story with great interest about meeting Laurie and Tommy, especially after he says it was divine intervention. Before bed, Kevin and Nora have a conversation that seems to be about Lily. We get a tease about Kevin maybe sleepwalking. Within this situation, we also get reminded that Kevin Sr. has gone off the grid and is in Australia, which becomes important. I think you know that.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel like that line is kind of, like, I was working with my dad, who, by the way, at this point was not in Australia after having done this, and he also did this, if you'd forgotten.
So. Yeah, and I think we had a lot of viewers that were, like, jumping on the leftovers train at this point, too. Like, if you look online and you look for reaction videos or reviews, there's a lot more for season 3 than any other season, because everyone talked about it so much in season 2. So, I think there's some shoehorning of some information in here to help people. Jill comes in and says, hi, bye. And I'm not gonna let you go through this season like everyone else did, thinking Jill's gonna show up again. She doesn't.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's a spoiler. I apologize for it. That's one of those things I don't want to spend a lot of time on, because we have to deal with certain characters. We have a shorter season, and Jill's not one of them, unfortunately.
Well, I feel like Jill had a moment in the sun in season 1, but she was kind of there season 2, and I guess this is like a token appearance, like she still exists and she's still around, but
yeah. And she's off in college, and and even in season 2, a couple things were shoehorned in, like her going into the church and cursing, which just seemed like something for them to give this great actress to do, and she has gone on to do great things. And it's just a sacrifice to the
Yeah, yeah.
to the leftover gods, I guess.
In terms of the this like birthday scene,
Yeah.
I this is if I remember right, this is kind of the not turning point, but it's like so far we've seemed to be just seeing, okay, it's 3 years later and everybody seems to be just getting along with their life quite happily, and this is like the culmination of that, because I think after this is where it starts to shift. But while we're in this moment, it's a nice moment, and we have kind of like at the end of season 2 when everybody's in the home and there's this joyful mood. We have a similar thing here, just more extended, and we see this like, birthday party and everybody's telling stories and having fun. Obviously, like you mentioned, the one caveat to that is that Lily seems to be not present. But aside from that, it does seem like a fairly stable environment. And it's like, I think I said to you afterwards, like, it would have been, because we've had so many like episodes of just emotional turmoil and chaos and people getting killed and coming back and people leaving families and joining families. It was nice to have a solid like 20 minutes, half hour where it was just like, oh, okay,
This is what could have been. This is what should
yeah,
be after we saw the end of season 2, right?
right. This is kind of what you imagine in your head when you think season 2 is the end of the show, and you think, I wonder what they're up to now. But yeah, so it's nice to have that, but at the same time, we understand that. I mean, you can't have a season that's just that, as much as some fans would probably like that.
Yeah, and then we get this big push in on Kevin, and they're making think of, oh, here we go again. You know what I mean? It's the same push in from season 1, Cairo, and
season 2,
and season 2, right? So, but in a way, it's the same thing because we wake up. There hasn't been sleepwalking, but then it pardon my language, just goes to shit after this, right? It's a Kevin wakes up the next morning and Nora is going for a bike ride, and once Kevin is alone, he duct tapes a plastic bag over his head and suffocates himself to Simon and Garfunkel's Feeling Groovy. Technically the 59th Street Bridge song. What a harrowing, shocking scene to watch. And your reaction was great, but like the reactions when we were watching it, the fact that I'm pretty sure Justin Theroux actually did this. They close up on his face, and you're watching the whole process. There's also some callback to laundry bags, right? Grabs his laundry bag. He's got his tape. This is a ritual. This is not something he does. This is not the first time he's done this. Okay. Is he dying? Is he getting really close to dying? Is he going back into this world? What is going on? And after and they don't give you any information. It cuts straight to him coming out of the house looking perfect. Walk me through you watching this, please, and what you're thinking.
Well, I don't know if this is what I felt right at the time of watching it. I think at the time of watching it, I was more just freaked out by what was going on to consider the implications. But afterwards, when I was spending more time thinking about it, I was actually glad that this was happening. Not this exact scene, or like not this exact thing that he's doing, but more the general fact that Kevin isn't perfectly okay yet. And I was glad to see that, because as weird as it sounds, it would just feel cheap from like a writing storytelling perspective, that if Kevin literally died and went to some otherworldly place and then came back and then did it again, he's just gonna like shrug that off and carry on with his life like normal, and that there would be no impact of that on his like worldview and psychology and the way he conducts himself. And it almost feels like that for the first like half of this episode, you think, okay, maybe that is what happened, and it would feel. I mean, for one, it just wouldn't feel like realistic if somebody were to do what Kevin did. I don't imagine them just being able to walk away from that and not be impacted over the long term. You know what I mean?
So after the short amount of time, you still believe that Kevin actually died and came back from the dead?
Well, I believe that he. I don't know, but putting myself in his shoes, like from what we saw,
Yeah,
it almost doesn't make a difference, does it? Whether he did or not. If he thinks he does, that's going to impact his mind as much as if he did or not. You know.
sure,
So it's more about what he thinks.
sure.
And yeah, so it's like obviously it's hard to watch, but it's at the same time you think, well, it kind of makes sense, you know.
Um,
You know.
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
and and if he doesn't believe, he's still testing out the theory over and over
mm.
again. Um, but I think we get pretty strong proof that he's buying into himself in the next scene, right?
The poison in the water.
Yeah, he goes,
Hmm.
there's a sudden cut to an alive and well Kevin. He goes down to the well where some protesters have poisoned the water at the baptism. Kevin jumps in the water to show people it was a hoax and reluctantly goes along with Michael and Matt's plan to baptize him.
Yeah, which almost makes me wonder if the hoax was staged in order to get Kevin in the water.
And I never
Maybe
thought
that's
about
a bit
that.
far,
Yeah.
but I know Matt definitely wanted him in there, and I'm not sure he would have been able to get him in any other way. But
No, and I don't think it was a hoax on Matt's part because I think he really just wants to baptize people in that water.
mm, mm,
And I think that there is a protest going on, and there's a conspiracy theory, which is not a theory about what happened to Evie and them. So I like that angle, but I don't think that's what's going on.
yeah, yeah,
One thing I will mention that I don't remember other people mentioning, and I'm sure they did, was the fact that he just felt that it was safe. Maybe it wasn't safe, and maybe then he went in the water and it was safe after he came out. Maybe he turned the poison into wine. I don't know. No.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you
There's
think of these protests?
the protests. I'm assuming it was purposeful. The way they shot this made it feel and look similar to some of the scenes from season one, but you have this weird inversion where the people in white are actually the people waiting to be baptized,
No, sure.
versus the GR last in season one. So it's kind of flipped on its head. Um,
Yeah, and all the protesters are wearing red, right?
yeah,
That's one of the shirts I want.
one of them. What are the other ones?
And why do you think Kevin goes along with the baptism? I mean, I think it goes with him saying everyone's a pilgrim and they're allowed in. I mean, he's just trying to make Jarden. He wants to give people what they want out of their visit to the place.
Um,
And it's going to
but at
look
the same time,
bad.
he doesn't. Mm-hmm.
It's going to
I
look
don't know.
bad if he says, "I don't. No, I'm not doing this."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I don't know how much weight he actually gives it, because of what he says to Michael afterwards, and I don't know how big a deal it is to him.
Well, I think we can get more into that in a little bit.
But if I remember right, when the baptism shot happens, we get a brief like snippet of International Assassin coming out of the bath.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Maybe he
I don't
feels
know
like
what to
it's
say about that, but
right.
water.
Well, while discussing the cover up in the car, Kevin and Michael are attacked by Dean, who thinks Kevin has changed. Just before he can shoot Kevin, Tommy shoots Dean in the head in an exact copy of a scene from season one where Dean kills a dog with the same headshot. A dog takes Dean's peanut butter sandwich. Tommy and Kevin discuss what it's like to kill someone as Kevin has flashbacks to killing Patty in the hotel from International Assassin. You were upset by the scene because you like Dean, huh?
Yeah, I did, and more than that, I missed Dean, and so it felt a little bit cruel to place him back within the show and then take him away so soon. But it did make for a pretty good scene. It legitimately shocked me when it happened. I wasn't expecting it to play out the way it played out, both with Dean attacking them and then with Tommy taking down Dean. And I don't know if there will be any kind of long-term implications for Tommy with doing this. I kind of feel like there might not be, because one, I don't know if we have enough time left in the show to set up a whole new arc for Tommy where he's dealing with repercussions of this. And also, even though Kevin thinks this is Tommy's like first time, it's actually not, because in season 1 he'd already done that. So I don't think this won't have too big of an impact on Tommy's character. That's what I think. But what's more interesting is it almost just allows for the conversation to take place, in which we see that Kevin, the way he treats that hotel experience is like it was real. And he just, the way he tells it to Tommy is like he fully believes what he did and that it was real, which is kind of interesting, because if he believes if he believes that he really did kill Patty in the hotel, then kind of by extension he has to believe that the hotel itself was real and that everything that comes with it was also real, because you can't say, oh yeah, I did do that, but the actual hotel itself wasn't real, because that would kind of make it a null point.
Well, just because it's in your head, Harry, does that not make it real? Yeah. And I really like the fact that like everything's going so easy, and then within 2 scenes with Kevin and the duct tape and the look on Justin Theroux's face after Dean is shot, I mean, you are fully aware that these people are back and they're here to do what they do, and they do it better than anyone else.
But I mean, I especially love the look on Kevin's face as the dog grabs the sandwich.
Yeah.
Kevin's face, right. He just realizes, oh dear, what am I in for this time?
Right. Yeah. Then that's a great like Lindelof moment too.
Yeah, like whether or not anything comes of that, it's so good for being there.
The best. So Kevin comes home to find Mary and Nora talking about Mary's decision to leave Matt and take Noah with her. She also lets them know that Matt is writing a new gospel about Kevin and his life. I don't have much to say about the scene, except it's the most that we've ever heard Mary talk.
Yeah.
She was on the West Wing for 7 years and talked more in one episode than she did in this whole series. She's a great actress, and I mean, what do you think about her feelings? I mean, Matt definitely took care of her, but definitely told her she couldn't leave the city limits. So what are you going to do? I mean,
yeah. Well, I think I mentioned at the time when we were watching that I guess you can understand Mary's thinking, but it's also just from like a viewing point of view, even though I guess they've been together for a good 3 years now and they've had their child. For us, we've only just seen Matt and Mary reunite. Not reunite in the terms of, speaking to each other again. After like 2 seasons of waiting, we finally get that. And then straight away, we're just suddenly having that threatened again. It's kind of like, we're not allowed to have anything nice, Lindelof. Can we not?
This is why we don't have nice things.
Yeah. But I mean, I have a feeling that she won't. I mean, she can't. I don't think she'll leave, at least not in the near term, because obviously if she left and the rest of the main major characters and players were still in Jarden, then it's not like we'd be having this brief B plot line with Mary off in New York or whatever. So either, I guess the options are either Mary's out of the show or she doesn't leave. And my money's on she doesn't leave. But the reason that this is introduced is to make sure we know that there's conflict and there's tension between them, and it's a legitimate possibility.
Okay. All right, so we got 2 big chunks of scenes to talk about real quick, because we're almost at the end of the episode. So Kevin confronts Matt at church about the book. He learns that Michael has told Matt about the hotel. John comes in and admits that he is also in on the book. He shot Kevin at point blank range and is a believer. John also believes that Evie could still be alive. They discuss all the various ways Kevin came back from the dead, and after a physical altercation, Kevin storms out with the book. And Matt says he can't believe that Kevin can die in Miracle. The beard looks good on you, all that kind of fun stuff. The thing that stood out to me watching it this time is, and it stood out before, is that even though John seems to be in a much better place, he is in a complete state of denial about what happened to Evie. And as people have pointed out before, is he even is wearing her kind of glasses, Evie's kind of glasses, those round spectacles. And Kevin is so mad, even though up until now I feel like he's believing it, feeling himself a little bit. You know, I don't know why, with taking everything else with such ease, letting the people into the town, taking care of the town, trying to take care of Dean through Laurie, why he explodes and is so mad by this. What do you think of this whole back and forth?
I mean, there's a lot going on. I'll just start with John, because what occurred to me while you were speaking was that even though John does seem to be okay now, it's sort of like an artificial okayness. Like it's being propped up by him being okay is being propped up by his like denial, and it kind of feels like once that is removed, then it could just come crumbling back down. Fortunately, he has a psychiatrist for a girlfriend or wife. I'm not sure what it is.
To point out, Laurie said again, and I don't know why this would go to her new marriage with John, but Laurie did say again, you never let anyone know if they're in the middle of a psychotic break that they're in the middle of a psychotic break. Okay, I just want to get that out there. Go ahead.
I wonder if that includes herself.
Boom. Okay, go ahead. You were saying about John.
But oh, and also just while we're talking about John, so when he says I brought some supper, it's interesting he used the word choice supper. He could have said I brought dinner. Could have said I brought food. Could have said I brought takeout.
They are really, they are doubling down on all religious symbolism in this episode right now. So
yeah.
Last Supper and styrofoam.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about what you said about why Kevin gets so mad about this, as opposed to any of the other things that don't seem to rile him up. And I'm not sure. I don't know.
That's like literally the thought I had while I was talking to you. Like I never even thought about it before till now. And I guess because in his mind, because of the things he's been through, maybe he feels a little bit betrayed by Michael. Maybe he feels a little bit betrayed by John by saying everything. Maybe it's hitting close to home because he's starting to feel, because like I said, he's starting to feel himself a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
and
let's take it a second. Right? Okay, here we go. Check it out. The Bible skips from Jesus when he was 13 to 30, right? So, and Martin Scorsese's movie, The Last Temptation of Christ, is, I don't know if you've seen that movie. All it does is deal with, the difficult, information of Jesus taking whatever information he got in that time in and dealing with it. Right? Let me know if I'm getting my Bible stuff wrong. But it seems like there might be some denial from a kid who's finding out he has this kind of weight on his shoulders. So maybe he gets a little mad if it hits close to home that someone says, hey, man, a pretty cool thing you did with the walking on the water over there. Is that a thing that's related to this? Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't speak too elegantly about the Bible stuff, but that's coming to my mind right now, is that it's another biblical connection that they're trying to make from Messiah to Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the hero's journey, refusal of the call. I don't know if that's the exact phrase, but it's you get the call to adventure, and then you have to tone it down at first, and maybe that's what's happening here. Kevin, there's because while he tries to, I've written in my notes that Kevin was trying to deny what happened. I don't know if he did exactly do that, but one thing that he definitely did was when Matt was saying like you can't die, and Kevin's like, I can die, like I can die. Like it just sounds like he's trying to convince himself more than anyone. Like he does not sound uh totally convinced when he says that.
Sure. Yeah, he's trying to. He's yeah. I mean, he can't believe it himself. It's his own self denial that causes his anger.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So maybe he
Mm-hmm.
is accepting these things that happen. Maybe he's trying to push them away.
Yeah, and I mean, there's stuff going on with all the members of this conversation. There's John, there's Kevin, but Matt as well. I was surprised by his lack of. I mean, when Kevin told him that Mary was planning to leave, all he did was just quote back at him that I can't remember the quote, but like you have to be willing to leave your family in order to follow. I don't know the gospel, and whether he's saying that he's willing to leave his family to follow Kevin, and that just weirds Kevin out, kind of, which you can understand. But I was surprised he wasn't more affected by that news, and I guess that just speaks to how his kind of fervor and excitement about what's going on with Kevin is to overriding all that other stuff.
Well, and I think one of the things about Kevin is he's an everyman for quote unquote baseline, quote unquote normal folk, which I kind of consider myself in the way of not being any kind of a member of any religious fanaticism, because that's one of the things I wouldn't be able to understand. Like, how could you leave your family to do that? And how could the person who is to be followed allow that kind of thing to happen and still call themselves like a higher power or divine? Do you know what I mean? It's the same problem I have with like Scientology or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? It's like and so Kevin, it doesn't compute for him that would be more important to Matt, but Matt has always been on this different spiritual wavelength. So he's not even upset that his wife and his child want to leave him, um, even falling back on the fact that he took care of her for so long because he now believes so strongly in the book of Kevin.
Mm.
And it's up Matt's ego too. Matt wants to be the one to write the book of Kevin, right?
Yeah, Kevin. Kevin says he tells Matt that he's insane, I think, and
Yeah.
I feel like Kevin's kind of been throwing that around this episode, kind of throwing his weight and saying like you're insane, you're insane, you're insane. When he says that to Dean, he says to Matt, and it's like, everybody except him, and it's like, well, no, because I feel like it's one of them where he's like projecting outward, and he just doesn't want to. He doesn't want to be the crazy one this time. It's like, please let somebody else be the crazy one this time.
Yeah, it's been 3 years. I'm okay now.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me, I'm on a horse. Great.
Yeah, which is actually what he says to Laurie, right? When he's like, I'm better now, and then she says, "Of course you are," even though she's previously said you would never tell anyone. Like she wouldn't have told him anyway, because her very philosophy is that you don't tell somebody they're having a major psychotic break when they're in the middle of it. So I don't know what she.
That part was actually in my notes, and I didn't mention it. I love that part, and I don't know, and I'm sure he sees it living with her for so long that she's just like, of course you are. It's like she's living with her new normal, which is everybody might be having some problems. Her ex-husband thought these things actually happened. Her current husband refuses to believe that his daughter is dead.
Yeah, and John says one of the lines I liked in this dialogue was when John says, "We can't just be going through this for nothing," and the way Kevin looks at him afterwards is like, so, like, I mean, it's kind of like a pity in Kevin's eyes. He's like, he just understands that John is just not with it, and it's like, I don't know. John seems to be turning to Kevin to places like. It's a weird, I don't know. It's a weird relationship, but
it's like, what am I supposed to do? And I think this is a direct quote from a podcast I've listened to from Bald Move, which I like to credit if I'm going to quote, is what are you supposed to? What am I supposed to believe that just because they have her dental records? Like, yeah, you're supposed to believe just because they have her dental records that she's dead. You are in fact supposed to believe that.
And it's funny. Well, it's not funny. That's not the right way of saying it. But it's kind of it's interesting to see that John is sort of completely in contrast to where he was in season 2, where miracles don't happen in Miracle, to now when he's like, he's like, well, Evie survived and Kevin is the new prophet, and it's definitely a reversal of and well, I mean, it's kind of like he's gone back on all of his major. What made John was like, he didn't trust Kevin, he didn't believe there'd be miracles, and he hated people like Isaac, who sold people stories. Whether or not Isaac did is still kind of, we don't know, but even in just one episode we've seen how he's gone back on like all of them, and now he's like trusting and putting his faith in Kevin, and like he's believing that miracles are happening in Miracle, and he's also doing exactly what Isaac was doing when he kicked Isaac out of town. So it's like, this is a very different John to what we saw in season 2.
And since we spent the whole last episode doing it, let's do it again. All praise goes to Kevin Carroll, the actor, because I believe it. I believe everything he says. Just like everybody else in this show, he's just doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've said this a couple of times when we've skipped between episodes, but this is not episodes, seasons. But this is another example of like the portrayal of the character is so dramatically different that you don't, like, in my head I can't.
He's unrecognizable from season 2.
Season 2 John and it's like it's not the same guy. I'm telling you.
Yeah, totally. Anything else about the church scene? Because we got one little scene to talk about.
You mean? Well, if the church scene includes the bit where Kevin goes outside, and it
doesn't.
No. Okay. No. Well, we can go to that then.
All right. Kevin goes to burn the book, but has second thoughts as he looks up. We follow the birds in the sky to where they land. We see someone who collects the birds and gives them to a nun. After they exchange money for the birds, the nun asks, "Sarah, does the name Kevin mean anything to you?" The camera pans to a much older Nora Durst, who answers no. And that's the end of the episode. Benji, thoughts?
I mean, we can get back to. Do you want to do Kevin first or the Nora review?
Oh, do you have anything to say about Kevin? I just thought that.
Right. Well,
yes, second thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not so much Kevin, but the we kind of get this visual like bridge between the two scenes, which is the bird and is it a dove or is it a pigeon? Or...
I think it could be a dove, or a
pigeon.
Because
what I was going to say about doves is anyone familiar with the baptism story or account of when Jesus was baptized knows that one of the major like symbols of that moment was that a dove descended from heaven after Jesus was baptized. And obviously this episode we've seen Kevin's baptism, and then there's a little bit of a time delay, but we're just seeing here a dove kind of circling above Kevin's head, and I think it's another example of that symbolism we've been talking about. Plus it ties us in real nice to this Nora scene.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I assume it is a dove now, but I want to hear what you have to say about the Nora scene.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Well, first of all, does Kevin burn the book, or does that Kevin keep the book?
Well, first time around when I was watching it, I was kind of like thinking he didn't, and I was like, A, I don't think he does, and B, I hope he doesn't because I want to see what's inside it. But then when I was pre-watch, and I was like, well, what are they going to show us in this? What could we possibly see in this book that we haven't already seen? Like we've seen Kevin go through all this stuff, like we were there, So I'm not sure if there's going to be like, I don't know why I wanted to see what was inside this book so much, given that we've been literally like following Kevin around for a good amount of time. So I was like, okay, well, maybe he could have burned the book, because I don't think it would have. It's not like they were planning to show us what was inside of it anyway. But
and it's perfectly reasonable. The name of the episode is The Book of Kevin, so maybe we dealt with the Book of Kevin and that's it.
Yeah, maybe we'll see it, but I just think it would be hard for them to. I mean, this is a visual medium. We can't have an hour-long episode where half an hour of it is them holding the camera steady over a book as they flip through the pages. I think it's more about the book itself as a what that means and signifies, rather than the actual contents of the book, which I think we know the gist of.
And do you think the contents of this book have anything to do with the question, Sarah, does the name Kevin mean anything to you?
As in that book has potentially circulated, and even nuns in Australia know about it.
Nuns in Australia in the future.
In the future, yeah.
Talk about this. I know you said you thought for a minute you were all smart because you thought it was Kevin Senior.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was longer than a minute.
Yeah,
it was almost the entirety of the scene, because I'd been waiting. Well, I knew that Kevin Senior would come back in this season. For one, we saw him in the trailer, so I knew he was coming sooner or later. And the fact that this was Australia, and the fact that it was the end of the episode, I thought it'd be a nice little send off for the episode and tie us over for the next one, if we had a little glimpse of what Kevin Senior was up to. And so I was definitely overconfident about that. And then obviously it took me a minute when she turned around. Like I did not, which it sounds stupid, I didn't recognize her for a second or two. I can see in the reaction video my reaction is quite delayed, because I genuinely didn't recognize it for a second. But you know what, the main thing that worries me about this epilogue is, this looks fairly far out in the future, so it almost leaves us with two options. One is that this is after the season 3 finale in terms of time, because we kind of imagine that season 3 will be the finale of that will be within the near future, maybe like in 14 days from this episode, when whatever happens, and that kind of feels like the natural point of the finale. But this looks like way past that. So I guess either and let me clarify as well, I think all of us watching are hoping for the finale of the show to be like happy and positive, and end with characters like Nora and Kevin on a good note. So with all that in mind, this little epilogue kind of left me with two potential options in my mind, which is that it's either after the finale, in which case that doesn't bode so well for the finale, because Kevin and Nora don't seem to be as close as we would hope. At this point, she's denying knowing him, and that's not a good sign, because what's going to happen over the next 14 days, and it just wouldn't feel like a good way to end the show, if that is the case. But the only other option that leaves us with is that this scene of Nora is before the finale, in which case that's almost what I hope, because I don't want the show to end with scenes like this. I want it to end on a happy note. That's all I'm asking. So in order for that to happen, the finale would have to take place after this, which I'm totally fine with that happening. It just leaves me a little bit confused as to how they're actually going to do that, given that all the hype seems to be surrounding 14 days from like right now. So I have no idea how that will happen.
And this is one of our favorite spots, because I have nothing. I can't say anything, and I'm not going to say anything. I do like to focus on her sentence, Sarah. What does the name Kevin mean to you? as in that's the same kind of question as in have you heard the good news or something like that. Which is, the answer to that is
Well,
he
yeah.
is.
Also,
You
what
know,
reminded me when
you
I
know what I
was
mean. So,
saying that, yeah, it was this after Jesus is taken by the Roman soldiers and Peter, the disciple, is like standing around with some regular people, and they ask him, "Hey, aren't you that guy that hangs around with Jesus?" And then at which point Peter denies knowing Christ a few times. That's like quite a famous account from the Bible.
mm-hmm.
And right here, if Kevin has turned into that kind of figure, and it's like, so hey, aren't you the one that was like hanging around with Kevin? And then she's denying it here. There's potentially a parallel there. But the good news in this case is that Peter later turns out to be a very good prophet, and he gets back on track, and it all works out okay.
Okay. I mean,
but what's interesting is the bike is something that maybe should have tipped us off, because we saw earlier in the episode Nora goes cycling, so there's that little connection.
It's actually fun too because I've taken to a lot of bike riding recently with my son, since everyone's stuck inside, and I'm in a pretty lucky, spacious neighborhood that we can ride bikes. Really good low impact workout.
And roads are pretty empty, I imagine.
Yeah. So that's it for the episode, man. Did you have any more thoughts on the Book of Kevin?
I like the new variation on the theme song, the one that comes in right at the end of the epilogue with Nora and then out to the outro. It's like the main one, or one of the main ones, but with it's got something new in it, which is cool.
And there's going to be more talk of theme music next week for sure. My question, I don't have any questions. I just want time to sign off. I know we got things to do. I just, if I get the video up of this, that'll be great. Everyone can tell us how we look, like and subscribe. Don't really tell us how we look. Just tell us if you are listening, please let us know if.
Tell me if this is a futile effort.
Tell me if it's worth it to keep doing the video part of the show, or just keep making it audio, because I want to do what you want, but it's hard to do the video stuff as I'm learning, but I need to learn. So thanks for listening or watching. Benji, thanks for being here. It's time to at some point watch episode 2 with you, called Don't Be Ridiculous. And thanks for listening and watching to 6 Years Later Leftovers Chat. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and we'll see you next time.